The Supreme Court just delivered a major blow to Donald Trump's authority, and in a fascinating twist, his own hand-picked justices were key to the decision. A 6-3 ruling has effectively dismantled a key pillar of the economic agenda he rolled out after his 2025 re-election. We're breaking down this historic decision, what it means for presidential power, and the immediate, fiery reaction from the former president. This is a constitutional showdown with huge consequences for the presidency and for your wallet. Let's get right to the heart of it. The Supreme Court, in a landmark decision on February 20th, 2026, titled Learning Resources, Inc. v. Trump, has declared that a president cannot use a 1977 law called the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, to unilaterally impose broad tariffs on goods coming into the United States. Since returning to office, Trump had used this act as his go-to weapon for a new trade war, claiming a national emergency allowed him to regulate imports, which he interpreted as the power to set massive taxes on them. Well, the court has now said, not so fast. In a 6-3 decision, the justices ruled that while IEPA lets a president regulate many aspects of importation, it does not grant the sweeping authority to create what is essentially a nationwide tax system without explicit permission from Congress. This ruling invalidates a core component of his recent economic strategy, potentially opening the door for billions of dollars in refunds to American companies who paid those tariffs. The decision doesn't erase all of Trump's tariffs, as some were enacted under different laws, but it demolishes the foundation upon which his most aggressive new trade actions were built. This is a direct check on executive power. A stunning rebuke. But the real headline, the twist that has Washington reeling, isn't just the ruling itself, it's who delivered it. The 6-3 majority was not a simple party line vote. The majority opinion, written by Chief Justice John Roberts, was joined by the court's liberal wing, Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson. But they weren't alone. They were joined by two of Donald Trump's own appointees, Justice Neil Gorsuch and Justice Amy Coney Barrett. That's right. Two of the three justices Trump placed on the highest court in the land just voted to dismantle one of his signature powers. They sided against the man who appointed them, creating a bipartisan coalition to rebuke his use of executive authority. The dissenters were Justices Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Trump's third appointee, Brett Kavanaugh, who wrote a lengthy argument in favor of the president's power. But the story of the day is the two who crossed over. Gorsuch and Barrett's votes were the deciding factor, turning what could have been a narrow defeat into a decisive, undeniable rebuke. This wasn't just a loss for Trump, it was a profound rejection delivered in part by his own legacy. So the big question is, why? Why would Gorsuch and Barrett vote against the president who put them on the bench? The answer lies in a powerful legal principle called the Major Questions Doctrine. In his majority opinion, Chief Justice Roberts argued that some issues are so huge, so economically and politically significant, that the president can't just claim authority over them based on vague or old laws. If Congress wants to give the president the power to single-handedly overhaul the nation's economy with billions in tariffs, it must say so explicitly and clearly. The court found that the phrase, regulate importation, in the 1977 IEPA law was nowhere near clear enough to justify the massive tariff regime Trump had built. Justice Neil Gorsuch went even further in his own concurring opinion. He focused on a related idea called the non-delegation doctrine, arguing that Congress itself is at fault for writing laws that are too broad, effectively giving away its core constitutional powers, like the power to tax and regulate commerce. For justices like Gorsuch and Barrett, who subscribed to a judicial philosophy of textualism and originalism, this wasn't about loyalty to a political figure. It was about preserving the separation of powers in the Constitution. They viewed this as Congress's job, not the president's, and they voted to enforce that boundary, regardless of who was in the Oval Office. The reaction from Donald Trump was as swift as it was furious. In public remarks and a series of blistering posts on Truth Social, he attacked the very integrity of the justices who made the ruling. He called the decision a disgrace and deeply disappointing, saying he was ashamed of the majority for lacking courage. While he didn't name them, his criticism was clearly aimed at his own appointees who sided against him. This split the Republican Party. Hardline supporters echoed Trump's anger, while other, more traditional Republicans praised the ruling, stating that it correctly upheld Congress's constitutional powers to control trade and taxes. The decision didn't just challenge Trump, it exposed the deep fractures within his own party over the fundamental role of the presidency. Before we get into what Trump is doing right now to get around this ruling, and believe me, he is not taking this lying down. If you're getting value from this breakdown, take a second to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We cut through the noise to bring you the facts and analysis you need to understand these critical moments. Anyone who thought this Supreme Court ruling would be the final word on Trump's trade war was sorely mistaken. Within hours of the decision, Trump was already executing a workaround. He immediately announced and signed an executive order imposing a new 10% global tariff on nearly all imports. This time, he isn't using the now neutered IEEPA. Instead, he has invoked a different, more obscure law, Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. This provision allows the president to impose a temporary tariff of up to 15% for a period of 150 days to address a balance of payments deficit. The next day, he stated his intention to potentially raise that tariff to 15%. It's a short-term fix, a stopgap measure, but it sends a clear message. The trade war is back on. An extension beyond 150 days would require an act of Congress, setting up another massive political battle down the road. And he's not stopping there. Trump has directed his administration to launch new Section 301 investigations into unfair trade practices, which could lead to even more targeted tariffs. He also plans to keep tariffs imposed under other statutes, like the Section 232 national security tariffs on steel and aluminum. The Supreme Court may have taken away one of his favorite tools, but Trump is making it clear that he has a whole toolbox left to use. So, what does all this legal and political maneuvering mean for the economy and for you? The impact is massive and complicated. First, let's talk about the tariffs that were just struck down. By early 2026, some estimates suggested Trump's second-term tariffs had cost the average American household between $1,000 and $1,300 in 2025 alone, baked into the price of everything from electronics to household goods. The Supreme Court's ruling could, in theory, be good news for consumers. It opens the door for American companies to claim back an estimated $130 to $175 billion in refunds for tariffs paid under the invalidated IEEPA law. If that money floods back into the economy, it could boost spending and help ease inflation. However, the celebration may be short-lived. Trump's immediate countermove with the new 10% global tariff under Section 122 creates a whole new wave of uncertainty. Economists are concerned that if these new tariffs stick, they could push inflation back up and potentially shave about 0.2% off GDP growth. The International Monetary Fund has previously warned that a broad global tariff, met with predictable retaliation from other countries, could significantly shrink both the U.S. and global economies. For small and medium-sized businesses, this is a nightmare of uncertainty, making it almost impossible to plan, price their goods, and manage their supply chains. So, where does this leave us? The Supreme Court has unequivocally reasserted its role as a check on executive power. In a rare and historic moment, a bipartisan majority, including two of Trump's own appointees, told the president that he could not simply rewrite the nation's economic laws on his own. It was a victory for the principle of separated powers and a reminder that the judiciary can and will draw a line. But in the same breath, we see a president who is defiant, resourceful, and utterly unwilling to accept the court's judgment. His immediate pivot to a new legal authority to relaunch his tariff campaign shows that this battle is far from over. The conflict has now shifted from the courts to the political arena, teeing up a monumental clash with Congress over the 150-day limit on his new tariffs. This ruling wasn't the end of the story. It was the start of a new, even more contentious chapter in the fight over presidential power, trade, and the future of the American economy. The ultimate question now falls to Congress. Will they allow these new tariffs to continue, or will they finally reclaim the authority the Supreme Court just handed back to them? What do you think will happen? Will Congress step in, or will Trump find a way to make these new tariffs permanent? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and as always, thank you for watching.